After watching hours of competitive Sprout gameplay and testing his attack and super mechanics a million times, here's everything you need to know to play Sprout like a pro. Let's start with how Sprout's attack works, and it comes in two portions. The first one is the throw, and that is what you see when you aim. Now this part takes the same amount of time to travel regardless of the range, so the longer range you throw it at, the faster your attack becomes, and the maximum range is 5 tiles. Now you can actually force the range to extend beyond 5 tiles by aiming on the far side of a wall. What that happens is that now the attack is basically forced to go that extra range to hop beyond the wall, and as I said, that not only increases the range, it also makes your attack go faster. You just want to make sure that the extended range is the path of least resistance for the attack. For example, it will go to the side in this situation because the side has less resistance, but if you aim it at the center, then going to the side is going to have too much resistance, so the attack is going to go forward, getting you the extra range. You can do this on maps like Canal Grande across the canal, or Bell's Rock in those little square blocks things. The second part is the bounce. The bounce adds an extra 3 1/3 tile to the attack, and then it explodes in a 3 tile radius. Now you can extend the range by bouncing off of walls, but the extended range depends on the angle of bounce. If you bounce it straight to the wall and it goes straight back, then it's only increasing by 1 tile, but if you are bouncing at a very shallow angle, it becomes 2 tiles instead. So if you're aiming in a straight line, try to find if there's any walls on the sides that you can bounce on to extend that range. Now bouncing more than once can extend the range, but the extra range becomes less and less. And also you want to give the shot some space to ricochet. If the shot hits the wall right before it's about to explode, it will just explode and it won't give you that extra range. Now one cool trick you can do with this is that you can use 2 shots to pinch the enemy. One shot can go straight ahead on one side, and the other shot can use a wall to ricochet off of the side wall to kind of engulf the enemy from both sides, left and right. Also, another thing to keep in mind is that when you're trying to hit Angelo or Eve on water, aim the throw portion to right in front of the water and let the bounce portion travel the attack on the water. If you aim the throw portion on the middle of the water, it's not going to work, it's going to treat that like a wall and just veer to the side. Okay, you have no idea how much time I spent researching that, just testing the attacks and range and all that. Way too much time. But I digress. And next is the super. As you know, it's a plus-shaped wall that lasts for 10 seconds, and a lot of times you get these random extra hedges, so the question becomes, what makes those form? Well, first let's establish that these hedges look different. The original hedges always has something extra to them, like for the Prince Sprout skin, it's that little roofs on the castle buildings. So I'm going to use that skin for this example because it's most obvious, but this applies to every single skin. Now the goal of these extra hedges is to 1. Eliminate 1 tile gaps because those are awkward to walk through, and 2. To eliminate diagonals. Let me show you an example. The green stuff is obviously the Sprout hedge, the original plus shape, and the black one at the bottom, we can treat that as a wall, and each of these boxes is 1 tile. If the wall is placed on this tile, this kind of plus shape would form, and because there is a 1 tile gap right there, we don't want that because that's awkward to walk through, so the algorithm fills that in with the extra wall, and this is how the wall would look like if you place it there. Now the second rule, as I mentioned, is diagonals. So if you get something like this, one of the walls is like at a diagonal to an original wall, if you get what I mean, an extra wall would generate on the horizontal side of the Sprout hedge. So if you look on the left here, that will get filled right there, and same thing here, it will go to the left instead of up to fill in there, and now the diagonal is eliminated. The third example here is this one. When you get a 1 tile diagonal gap, which is something like, oh my god, something like this right there. We don't want that as well, so we're gonna fill that block in. But filling that in also leaves this 1 tile gaps, so we want to fill that in as well. There is a diagonal here between the black wall and the extra hedge, so we want to go to the horizontal side, we go to the left, and that gets filled as well. So this is how the result would look. And the final example, there is another diagonal right there. This wall doesn't really matter here as long as we see a diagonal right there, so that is going to get filled in. And as you can see, one tile gap right there, that's going to get filled in as well. And this is how the result is going to look. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight on how the wall generation works. There are some extra special rules, but those are pretty specific and you don't need to know them exactly. Okay, so you might say that knowing these intricacies isn't necessary, and you would be kinda right, but also it's just important to understand how your walls will look, especially in the heat of the moment. If you familiarize yourself with these concepts, you can react very quickly and place the perfect super with a very quick response time. So now that we know the rules, let's find some practical use for them. I'll show you some cool sprout walls that will transform how you play these maps. But to do that, we need to become Sprout himself. So now that we garnered the Sprout energy, let's go. The first example is the middle of Flaring Phoenix. If you aim here, you can get a freeway block to block the enemy from switching lanes and take control of the mid. Out in the open, if you aim here, you can protect yourself using this escape route right there. The next one is split, and this is actually pretty cheeky. So if you place your wall here, you can protect yourself, but that's not the only thing. You can see that this wall leaves a tiny gap on the zone here for you to stand on. You basically get 10 seconds of free zone space while the enemy can do nothing. Because usually brawlers like Rico will play back in the lane and they can't do anything against your wall. The next one is Gold Arm Ghost, which is one of the best maps for Sprout. If you've placed your wall 3 tiles away from the top and left, you can create this freeway choke point. So if you're coming from the right, you can control the center and potentially split the enemy team into top and bottom. And now I've saved the best for last. In Dueling Beetles, a normal person will block the middle choke point by just placing it there. But if you move it 2 tiles forward, you can create this shape, which gives you more protection to block enemy range shots like snipers and stuff. But what's even better is that if you place it 2 tiles back, you can literally block the enemy from switching lanes in that crucial corridor, which means when the enemy respawns, they can't switch lanes in that side. They gotta walk on a straight line straight to the zone, and that is super inconvenient. This is such a genius strat. One more thing you can do is that in most maps, in the corner, if there's at least 4 tiles from both sides, you can aim your wall 3 tiles away from the walls, and that can trap you in a 2x2 hole. Now that seems gimmicky, but you can do this to protect yourself during the gem countdown, or to trap the ball in Brawl Ball towards the end of the match. And you can even do this in the center, in hideouts, which can protect you from snipers and all that. This isn't about this exact wall formation, but look at the Sprout trapping himself on that corner. The Chester can't do anything, and the Sprout is just free to attack the safe with no one stopping him. What's crazy is that this is a competitive match as well, so if they can do it in competitive, you can do it in your trophy or your ranked matches. Before we get to the super creative ways to use Sprout Super, including using it to give you immunity, no, I am serious there. But first, let's host a competition, okay? I want you to find the biggest Sprout wall you can generate in the 3v3 maps that are in rotation right now. And whoever has the biggest Sprout wall with the most tiles can win a Bull skin. You know what? Sure, let's throw in a Brawl Pass there as well. So a Bull skin and a Brawl Pass. So, good luck. But now let's talk about how you can use these hedges to your advantage. The first use case is to trap the enemy in the smoke. This seems to be a strategy that is used in most competitive games in Knockout. The Sprout is to main passive at first to charge a super or hypercharge, and wait till the smoke comes in to add pressure, and then a super to block the enemy access of the center, so the enemy struggles with the pressure from the smoke. Even in this situation, the Larian Lori isn't gonna die, but he has to now go around the hedge, and the Larian Lori isn't built for a mid lane, so now he's exposed and vulnerable in the center. And of course, the Sprout Wall is a great way to advance to get control of the center. Look at how quickly the enemy is just shut down there. Now the enemy team is entirely forced back and the Sprout can take control of the center. It can also be used to punish enemies that aren't in the correct placement. So for example, there's no one at the center lane here, so the Sprout blocks the center to allow Sprout to creep up back to the center lane again, putting them in a pretty awkward position. Or look at this. This 4-way block separates all 3 teammates here. And again, that is an awkward situation because they can't support each other anymore. It's also a great way to get rid of bushes. For example, in Goldarm Gulch, if you see the enemy advancing up the side bushes, you can super to block them from going forward. And this is great for later rounds as well, because that means they can't creep up to you again from the side bushes, which is crucial because Sprout does terribly in close range scenarios. You can do the same out in the open to punish the enemy for not being at their correct lane, while also stopping them from maneuvering in that crucial bush in later rounds. You can even use the wall to pinch the enemies. So for example, the Max here is in danger of getting killed, so the Sprout just blocks Max the access to escape, forcing him to stay within Janet's eyesight so the Janet can shut him down easily. But you gotta make sure every time you place the wall that it doesn't get in the way of your teammates. This sounds pretty simple, but even the best players can fall for this. For example, the Sprout listened to my advice and placed the bush to the side, but it just completely blocked the Draco push, and now the Draco is stranded there with his wasted super. Now this wall looks good on paper, but what it actually did is that it gave the Barley more protection to advance up and force out the Piper, making her vulnerable. So now the Barley has gotten control because of that Sprout wall. Now we talked a lot about using the super for the team, but it can also be used to protect yourself in so many ways. For example, to block sniper shots. If you're in a sticky situation, you can place the wall even if it's just a plus shape to protect yourself, to give yourself some space to maneuver around so you can keep your position while also staying safe. And in this situation, it even managed to waste the Piper super. And of course, attacks aren't the only projectiles, so it can block any super that's a projectile, like BB, Charlie, Cordelius, B, Otis, Willow. Some of these supers are very punishing, like Cordelius or Willow, so it might be worth it to block the projectiles or just nudge yourself out of the way using your super. Other supers you can block are Colette, Chuck, you can literally block him from going forward. Nani, that's a classic one and it's easy as well. Squeak, you can make the blob stick to on the hedge, or you can interrupt Carl's super. Most of these require super quick reflexes, so it might be hard if you don't have 0 ping, but you can at least try it out to kind of do a Hail Mary if things get desperate enough. The next ones though, here are the real gems. Sprout Super gives you immunity for a split second. You can see for those few frames, the Sprout jumps up in the air, and that is when Sprout is actually immune to all stuns and damages as well. So if you can time this perfectly, you can nudge yourself in the air and block some pretty serious stuff, such as Bo's Mines, Primo's Asteroid, Dynamite Super, that is a massive one, Lou's Hypercharge, Frank's Super. Now that is inconsistent on the damage part, but it's guaranteed to block the stun if you do it correctly. Next is Miko's Hypercharge, Ruff's Super, Piper's Hypercharge Knockback, and of course Tara's Super. Now I could tell you exactly how to time these, but that could be impractical because we all have different ping. So what I would say is that leave a bit of time, because placing the wall does require some extra split of a second. And most of my own failures come from placing my super a bit too late. Okay, now matchups. Assassins are the obvious big counter, especially brawlers like Buzz, BB, Mortis, and Miko. Miko is a huge counter, because Sprout just sucks at close range. If you do unfortunately find an assassin next to you, what you can do is aim at a nearby wall so the attack bounces back to the assassin, or you can just accept your fate and spin and thumbs down, I guess. It doesn't make a big difference either way actually. Bouncing shots won't save you, it'll just help you charge a bit of your super. But if there's a little bit of distance between you and the assassins, what you can do is aim your super slightly towards the assassin direction, and hopefully that'll nudge yourself to one side and the assassin to the other side. but none of these counter tactics are that reliable. So you should almost never pick Sprout in rank except for the last choice, and you're gonna make sure that the enemy has no assassins. Some good matchups though are snipers like Piper, Bee, or Bell, and also Tick, just anything that Sprout can free tap easily. Speaking of that, one big thing that'll improve your gameplay on any brawler is knowing what brawlers you can kill in 2 or 3 shots. But because I want this video to be accurate in the long term, I'm not going to tell you exactly what brawlers you can free tap. Instead, I'll tell you the HP required, so balance changes aren't going to affect this. Sprout deals 1960 damage per shot, and because no brawler has below 3920 HP, Sprout can't 2-shot anyone, but he can 3-shot anyone with below 5880 HP, which would probably mean most snipers. Okay, now game modes. Bounty, Wipeout, and Knockout are the standout game modes for Sprout by far. That is where snipers are played the most, so that fits perfectly. The 2 best maps by far for him is Goldarm Gulch and Bell's Rock. Out of all the games that I analyzed, 63% of them are played on only these 2 maps. And keep in mind, in most seasons, only one of these 2 maps are actually in rotation. The reason why Sprout does so well is because of this grid formation. It obviously benefits throwers, but it also benefits bouncing shots, and it benefits wall placements to lock the enemies out of the grid. Some other decent maps are Flaring Phoenix, Hideout, Shooting Star, and Dueling Beetles. Now in terms of the build, let's start with gadgets. Always go Transplant. I've never seen a competitive match using the other gadget for years probably, because this is such a lifesaver. If you made a mistake on the wall, use this. If the wall that you place is no longer relevant, like if the enemy went to another route, use this. If you have a heart attack, use this. Garden Motor is not going to help with a heart attack, but you know what will? A Transplant. The best method for this is to use this when the wall is jiggling right before it disappears, so you get the most out of your wall. You can also use this to advance forward. So this is a textbook example, pushing enemies back to spawn using wall, gadget, and then wall again. Oh, and here's a trick with the gadget. If you charge another super in time before your last wall breaks, you can place the wall and then immediately gadget to get a second wall, and now you have 2 new walls to play around. And that opens up a lot more possibilities to block different lanes. Now for star powers, you almost always want to go for Overgrowth, because every 5 seconds the exploding range increases by 25%, which means 1 extra tile of attack range, and that is so good for making sure your attacks land. One great trick is to use this for wall peeking. You can hit people behind walls far away. This is such a great combination of bouncing shots and wall peeking. He's using the bounce to extend the range behind the bush, and then the explosion gives him enough space to hit the Grom. This can catch people off guard so easily. Now this can be possible without Overgrowth, but using it is much easier to secure those hits. Next is gears. Supercharge is a must-have here. Literally all the esports games that I analyze use this gear, because with this gear, it takes 4 shots to charge a super instead of 5, and it makes the double super trick way easier. The second gear is probably shield gear. 69% of all the games I analyzed used the shield gear, because it increases the health from 6,000 to 6,900. Sprout probably wouldn't be damaged too often, so there should be time for you to stack up that shield while you attack in the backlines. Finally, we have the Hypercharge. Let's talk about the stat increases first. The shield gives Sprout an effective HP of 6,300. The plus 25% damage means that he will do 2,413 damage, and the plus 26% speed means that he'll move a very similar movement speed to BB with the Home's Run star power. And the Hypercharge takes 11 shots to charge, 10 with the Supercharge gear. So now to the actual feature. Anyone standing on these tiles around the original 5 hedges will take 500 damage damage per second. And the effect doesn't apply to the extra walls that spawn from like the one-tile gaps and stuff. Now, people always say that the Hypercharge is useless, but I actually disagree a lot. I don't think it's nearly as weak as people make it out to be. Now, don't get me wrong, it's nothing great, but it's nowhere near useless like Charlie or Pearl. So I'll prove it to you that is actually quite useful sometimes. The first use case is the one that everyone talks about, and that is the heist safe. Because the safe touches all 5 hedges, it takes 2500 damage every second, and that lasts for 10 seconds, so that's 2500 damage or 32% of the safe's HP. You can actually use the gadget to get even more damage. You can place the wall 1 tile to the side, which does mean that the safe is going to be dealt 2000 damage every second, but because that one sole tile isn't occupied by the safe, it means that you can activate the transplant gadget and you can place another wall, which just increases the duration of your wall, which increases the damage. But that's not the only use case. You can use the transplant gadget to take off your hypercharged wall, and that basically leaves a giant berry attack on the floor, and that's actually super good area control. The more centered the brawler is in that giant berry attack, the more damage it'll be dealt, and that's up to 2500 damage. Just walking through it deals 3000 damage to Frank, and that's a super fast brawler. Imagine the extra damage that it'll deal to slower brawlers or brawlers with lower HP. This is so good to block choke points, and you basically get to block 2 places with the giant berry attack and the other hypercharged wall. Join my Discord server to get more info on the competition and to join it, and leave some extra tips in the comments if you have some. I'll try to gather the best ones, and maybe I'll post it as a pinned comment or even on Twitter just to give you guys even more material.